Appendix: The Jews in Spain. The persecution of the Jews by the Gothic Spaniards naturally made them the implacable enemies of the Christians. Being a very numerous colony in Spain, for Hadrian had transported thither many thousand families, the Jews gave the Arabs very effective help in conquering the country, both by betraying places to them and garrisoning captured towns, while the Arabs went on to fresh conquests. Consequently, the relations between the Jews and Muslims were for a long time very cordial, though this cordiality wore off in the course of time. Their numbers seem to have been considerable under the Muslim occupation, and whole towns were set apart as Jewries. In France, the prejudice against the Jews showed itself very strongly among the clergy, though Louis I and his wife Judith favored them. They were generally ill-treated, and their slaves were induced by the clergy to be baptized. Thereupon they became free, as Jews were not allowed to have Christian slaves. But it must be admitted that the Franks had reason for disliking the Jews, as it was well known that they sold Christian children as slaves to the Muslims of Spain. They also seem to have been able to make some proselytes from among the Christians, and we hear of one apostate of this kind named Eleazar, to whom Alvar addressed several letters under the title of the Transgressor. This man's original name was Bodon, a Christian of German extraction. He was brought up with a view to holy orders. In 838, while on his way to Rome, he apostatized to Judaism and opened a negotiation with the Jews in France to sell his companions as slaves, stipulating only to keep his own grandson. The next year he let his hair and beard grow, and went to Spain, where he married a Jewess, compelling his grandson at the same time to apostatize. In 845 or 847, his attitude became so hostile to Christians in Spain that the latter wrote to Charles, praying him to demand Eleazar as his subject, which, however, does not seem to have been done. There seems good reason to believe that Eleazar stirred up the Muslims against the Christians, and the deaths of Prefectus and John may have been due to him. After this we hear no more of Eleazar, but the position of the Jews with regard to the Arabs seems to have been for long after this of a most privileged character. Consequently, the Jews in Spain had such an opportunity to develop their natural gifts as they have never had since the capture of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, and they showed themselves no whit behind the Arabs, if indeed they did not outstrip them, in keeping alive the flame of learning in the Dark Ages. In science generally, and especially in the art of medicine, they had few rivals, and in learning and civilization they were no less than the Arabs, far ahead of the Christians. The good understanding between the Jews and the Arabs, with the gradual process of time, gave place to an ill-concealed hostility. And at the beginning of the 12th century, there seems to have even been a project formed for forcing the Jews to become Muslims, on the ground of a promise made by their forefathers to Muhammad that, if in 5 centuries their Messiah had not appeared, they would be converted to Mohammedanism. Perhaps this was only a pretext on the part of the Muslims for extorting money. At all events, the Jews only succeeded in evading the alternative by paying a large sum of money. Even in the early years of the conquest, they were subject to the rapacity of their rulers. For when on the rumor of the Messiah having appeared in Syria, many of the Spanish Jews, leaving their goods, started off to join him. The Muslim governor, Anbasa, seized the property so left and refused to restore it on the return of the disappointed emigrants. From their contact with Arabs and Christians, the Jews seem to have lost many of their distinctive beliefs, and in the 12th century, Maimonides, the greatest name among the Spanish Jews, wrote against their errors. One of these seems to have been that the books of Moses were written before the creation. Another, that there was a series of hells in the next world. Many Jews attained to very high positions among the Arabs, and we hear of a certain Hasidi ibn Barhut, who was inspector of customs to Abdurrahman III, ambassador to the king of Leon in 955, and the king's confidential messenger to the monk John of Gores a few years later. He was also distinguished as a physician. While the Arabs still retained their hold on the fairest provinces of Spain, the lot of Jews, even in Christian territories, was by no means unendurable. They were sometimes advanced to important and confidential posts, and it was the murder of Alfonso VI's Jewish ambassador by the King of Seville which brought about the introduction of the Almoravides into Spain. There is a strange story told of the Jews at the taking of Toledo by the Christians in 1085. They waited on Alfonso and assured him that they were part of the 10 tribes whom Nebuchadnezzar transported into Spain, and not the descendants of those Jerusalem Jews who crucified Christ. Their ancestors, they said, were quite free from the guilt of this act, for when Caiaphas had written to the Toledan synagogue for their advice respecting the person who claimed to be the Messiah, the Toledan Jews returned for answer that in their judgment the prophecies seemed to be fulfilled in him, and therefore he ought not by any means to be put to death. This reply they produced in the original Hebrew. It is needless to say that the whole thing was a fabrication. Gradually, as the Christians recovered their supremacy in Spain, the tide of prejudice set more and more strongly against the Jews. They were accused of contempt for the Catholic worship, desecration of its symbols, sacrifice of Christian infants, and other enormities. Severe laws were passed against them, as in the old Gothic times, and their freedom was grievously curtailed in matters of dress, residence, and profession. As a distinctive badge, they had to wear yellow caps. At the end of the 14th century, the people rose against them, and 15,000 Jews were massacred in different parts of Spain. Many were nominally converted, and 35,000 conversions were put to the credit of a single saint. These new Christians sometimes attained high ecclesiastical dignities and intermarried with the noble families, the taint of which, mala sangre, came afterwards to be regarded with the greatest horror and aversion. It was against the converted Jews that the Inquisition was first established, and they chiefly suffered under it at first. In 1492, on the final extinction of the Arab dominion in Spain, a very large number of Jews were expelled from Castile.